When I stepped out of the dusty pickup truck that had carried me from the gray noise of the city into the quiet openness of the countryside, I felt something inside me loosen, like a knot that had been tightening for months was finally beginning to unravel. My cousin Clara had invited me to stay at her ranch for as long as I needed, and after the breakup I'd gone through, I needed more time than I wanted to admit. The last few weeks had left me feeling hollow, like I'd been walking around carrying only pieces of myself. Coming here felt like a chance to gather them back together. The ranch was wide and sunlit, with the smell of warm earth and horses drifting on the wind. I didn't realize how much I missed silence until the land offered it to me like a gift. Clara stepped out of the barn, waving her hand high, her smile warm and familiar. I hadn't seen her in years, yet something about her expression made it feel like no time had passed at all. She hugged me warmly, told me I looked tired, and said this place would fix that. I wanted to believe her. Then someone stepped out behind her, wiping his hands on a pair of work gloves. His voice reached me before anything else, steady, calm, and warm in a way that settled almost too easily into the quiet space inside me. "You must be Ethan," he said. "I'm Cole." He extended a hand. When our palms met, the shake was firm, confident, but gentle enough to feel intentional. I didn't know what to make of that. Clara introduced him as one of her ranch hands, someone she trusted to keep the place running when she couldn't. Cole gave a small nod, almost shy, but the kind that made you pay attention without meaning to. I noticed his kindness more than anything, an ease in the way he spoke, the patient way he explained where things were, how the ranch was laid out, what I should watch out for if I wandered around alone. It wasn't flirtation, just a warmth that softened the edges of everything around us. He offered to show me how to saddle a horse later in the day. I almost said no. I didn't want to be a burden, but the sincerity in his voice made it impossible to refuse. When we were in the stable hours later, the soft clink of metal and the smell of hay filling the air, he guided me through each step with a calm patience. I fumbled more times than I'd admit to anyone, and each time he laughed, not at me, but in a way that made the whole thing feel lighter. Once or twice, our hands brushed when we reached for the same strap. It was nothing. It meant nothing. At least, that's what I told myself whenever it happened. There was no reason for my breath to catch, no reason for warmth to rise in my chest. But it did, quietly, unexpectedly. While we worked, Cole talked a little about the ranch, about Clara, and eventually, without any particular reason, he mentioned his boyfriend, Ryan. The way he said the name wasn't unhappy, but it wasn't joyful either. It sounded neutral, almost too neutral, like someone describing a distant relative. I didn't ask questions. It wasn't my place. By late afternoon, heavy clouds rolled in across the sky, surprising even Clara. The air changed, cooling quickly, and a storm began building in the distance. Lightning cracked across the far horizon, and the ranch dogs started barking. Cole told me we should get inside the bunkhouse before the power lines near the barn went down. As we headed across the open ground, a sudden clap of thunder shook the sky so violently that I froze mid-step. Before I could react, Cole reached out and grabbed my arm, steadying me as the wind kicked dirt around us. "Easy," he said, his voice low but grounding. "Come on, this way." I let him guide me through the storm as though following a familiar voice in the dark, even though I had only known him for a day. By the time we reached the bunkhouse, the lights flickered twice and then went out entirely. Cole lit a small lantern from the emergency shelf, the flame casting warm shadows across the tiny room. Another thunderclap hit, so hard the window rattled, and I instinctively backed toward him. I must have slipped on something, because the next thing I knew, his hand was on my shoulder, pulling me down beside him on the edge of his bed, not forcefully, but instinctively, protectively, like someone reacting without thought. We sat there in the dim light, listening to the storm pound the roof. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy with something unspoken, something neither of us dared to examine too closely. I didn't move away, and he didn't let go. Long after the thunder softened and the rain settled into a steady quiet, I lay awake replaying that moment in my head, wondering why he'd pulled me close, wondering why I hadn't moved, wondering what exactly had shifted between us in the dark, and why it felt like the beginning of something I wasn't ready for and yet couldn't ignore. The morning light crept through the thin bunkhouse curtains long before I was ready to face it. I'd hardly slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt again the quiet pressure of Cole's hand on my shoulder, the way he pulled me close without thinking, the sound of his breath matching mine as the storm raged outside. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't planned. But it had meant something. I just didn't know what. When I stepped outside, the ground was damp, the sky washed clean, and everything smelled new. Cole was already out by the stables, brushing down one of the horses. He lifted his head when he heard me approach, offering a small smile, gentle, friendly, as if nothing unusual had happened the night before. I returned the smile, but my stomach tightened with confusion. Maybe he'd forgotten. Or maybe I was the only one replaying the moment from the storm. Clara joined us a few minutes later, coffee mug in hand, a wide grin on her face. "Looks like you two survived the night," she joked, bumping my shoulder with hers. "Cole doesn't bring just anyone into the bunkhouse. You must be special." My face flushed immediately. Cole's ears reddened just enough for me to notice. He laughed softly and said it was just the storm, nothing dramatic. But there was a flicker in his eyes, quick, almost hidden, that told me he hadn't forgotten anything. The morning passed with simple tasks: feeding the horses, checking the fences, helping Clara stack feed bags. Every time I glanced at Cole, he seemed calm, steady, focused. And every time he glanced at me, I felt a tiny spark of warmth that I tried to ignore. It wasn't just attraction. It was comfort, and that made it complicated. Later, as we walked the fence line, Cole finally spoke. "I'm sorry about last night," he said quietly. "The storm hit hard. I didn't want you slipping in the dark." I nodded slowly. "You didn't do anything wrong." He kept his gaze on the ground. "It didn't feel wrong," he admitted, so softly I almost missed it. We fell into silence, and for a moment the only sounds were the distant lowing of cattle and the rustle of wind through the grass. Then he sighed. "Ryan and we haven't really been in a good place. He's busy. Long hours. He stops by when he can, but lately that hasn't been often." I didn't say anything. It felt dangerous to speak, like one word from me might break something fragile. Cole continued. "I guess I've been feeling alone, more than I want to admit." "Everyone feels that way sometimes," I said gently. "It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong." He glanced at me then, his eyes heavy with unspoken worry. "It felt too easy to be close to you last night, easier than it should have been." I swallowed hard. We were scared. That's all. Storms do that. Cole didn't challenge me, but he didn't agree either. We finished the fence repairs in quiet companionship, and as the sun dipped toward the hills, we headed back to the barn. Clara was already there, humming as she swept the floor. She gave us a knowing look that made me feel exposed, though she said nothing. As the evening deepened, Cole invited me to sit outside the barn with him. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, and the air was cool on our skin. We didn't talk at first. We just listened to the faint sound of animals settling in for the night. The quiet felt comfortable, almost necessary. Finally, Cole spoke. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he said. "Least of all you." "You're not," I replied immediately. "Nothing has happened." "But it feels like something has," he whispered. His words hung in the air, heavier than I expected. And the worst part was, he was right. Something had shifted. Something neither of us had invited, but neither of us had pushed away. Before I could respond, the sharp ring of a phone vibrated the air. Cole pulled it from his pocket, his expression tightening the moment he saw the name on the screen. "It's Ryan," he said. I nodded and stepped away to give him privacy. But I couldn't avoid hearing the tension in his voice, the clipped tone, the practiced patience, the exhaustion. The conversation was short, ending with Cole rubbing the back of his neck and staring at the dirt as though trying to read something in it. When he finally walked back over, he sat beside me without speaking. The sky had darkened, and the first stars were beginning to appear. "Everything okay?" I asked softly. He shook his head. "No, not really." He hesitated, then added, "Last night, it wasn't a storm that made me pull you close." My breath caught. The night around us suddenly felt too quiet. "I shouldn't have said that," he murmured. looking away. I'm sorry. But apology or not, the truth was out there between us now. Quiet, undeniable, and changing everything. Chat G. I didn't sleep much that night. Cole's words replayed over and over, turning slowly in my mind like a slow-moving storm I couldn't outrun. It wasn't the storm that made me pull you close. I kept hearing it, kept feeling the weight of it, and every time I did, a knot tightened in my chest. I wasn't angry at him. I wasn't even surprised. I was scared. Scared of what it meant for him, for me, for whatever had quietly grown between us without either of us asking for it. By morning, I made a decision. I needed space. I helped Clara with breakfast, stayed inside folding laundry longer than necessary, and avoided walking past the barn where I knew Cole would be. It wasn't easy. Every time I heard footsteps on the porch or a horse whinny outside, my heart kicked in a way I didn't want to admit. Avoiding him felt wrong, but being near him felt dangerous. And I didn't want to be the reason he made a choice he'd regret. Clara eventually found me sitting alone on the back steps, staring out across the quiet fields. She sat beside me, without saying anything for a long while. Finally, she asked, "You want to talk about what's going on? You two have been acting like you're avoiding a wildfire." I gave a tired laugh. "Nothing's going on." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Ethan, I might run a ranch, but I'm not blind." I sighed, unsure where to begin. "It's complicated." "It usually is," she replied gently. "But complicated isn't the enemy. Dishonesty is. Don't run from something important just because it scares you." Her words settled into me slowly, like seeds pushing roots into soft soil. But before I could respond, I heard footsteps behind us. When I turned, Cole was standing a few yards away, hands in his pockets, eyes tired but determined. "Can we talk?" he asked. Clara squeezed my shoulder once before stepping inside, leaving the door half open behind her. I nodded, though my heart beat a little too hard as I stood up. Cole didn't say anything at first. He simply walked past me toward the paddock, and I followed, the soft crunch of gravel beneath our boots filling the silence. When we reached the fence, he stopped and rested his arms on the top rail, staring out at the horses grazing in the morning sun. "I called Ryan last night," he finally said. His voice was calm, but there was something raw under the surface. "We talked for a long time. A real conversation. The kind we haven't had in months." I swallowed, waiting. He continued. "I told him the truth, that we weren't in the right place anymore, that the distance wasn't working, that we'd both been avoiding the inevitable." He paused, the breeze lifting his hair slightly. "We ended things." My chest tightened, not with guilt, but with a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. "Cole, I never wanted to be the reason." "You're not," he interrupted gently. "This wasn't about you. It wasn't even about last night. It was about a relationship that had been fading long before you got here. Maybe you helped me see how lonely I'd gotten, but you didn't break anything. That was already cracked." His honesty made it harder to breathe. Part of me wanted to step closer. Part of me wanted to run. "Even if that's true," I said quietly, "I don't want to be a rebound. I don't want you to make choices just because someone new showed up." Cole turned toward me, and for the first time in days, he looked steady, grounded, certain. "I'm not choosing out of confusion," he said. "I'm choosing out of clarity. I've been holding on to something that wasn't working because I was afraid of hurting someone. But sometimes holding on hurts more than letting go." His words settled between us like warm sunlight after a long storm. He stepped closer. Not touching, not reaching, just standing near enough that I could feel the sincerity in every breath. "I don't expect anything from you," he said softly. "Not now, not later. I just didn't want to hide the truth from you." I looked at the ground, then back at him. "I don't know where this goes. I admit it. I don't even know what I'm ready for." "That's okay," he said. "We don't have to know. We can take it slow." The gentleness in his voice loosened something inside me, something I had been holding tight ever since my breakup, something I didn't realize could still soften. We stood there a while longer, letting the quiet wrap around us. No declarations, no dramatic gestures, no promises we weren't ready to make. Just two people choosing honesty over fear, truth over silence. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in warm bands of gold and orange, I walked alone toward the front porch. I looked out at the ranch, the place I'd come to escape my past, and felt something inside me shift. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know where things with Cole would lead. But I knew one thing for certain. Something had changed inside me. Something had opened. And as the wind whispered across the open fields, I realized a truth I hadn't been ready to say until now. My life had changed forever. Not because a cowboy had pulled me close, but because, for the first time in a long time, I was ready to pull my own heart back together.